moment. And I don't want to see business owners having to go into incarceration for 6 months for doing the wrong thing. Of course, the government's appeal is also to the patrons of our venues and restaurants and licensed premises. The first line of defence are those that are enjoying themselves and attending these businesses. We are encouraging them. There were over 250,000 people that found themselves out of work when we had restrict the trade of some of these licensed premises, and we don't want to do that. That is not in the best interests of the economy, and it's certainly not in the best interests of the mental health of our community. So the first line of defence will always be the patrons. They need to make sure they are doing the right thing. Can I just make a few comments about the weather that's coming up over the course of the next 48 hours? The Bureau of Meteorology is suggesting there will be some significant wet weather across the state. And of course, sometimes that means localised flooding, and occasionally that means that we have to establish and raise evacuation centres. This will be a new challenge under the auspices of a pandemic. Some of these evacuation centres are in small community halls, small clubs, where under the current circumstances we would not be inviting people to gather in such circumstances. So when you are preparing for an evacuation with the current weather conditions, the appeal is of course to make sure that you have a face mask. We want to make sure that people that are unfortunately removed from their homes because of the natural disasters that may be pending, they take every precaution. And it may not always be available to them when they attend at these evacuation centres. And they need to also have a plan B, and that would of course be to attend a loved one's home in the event that they have to evacuate or leave their own premises. I'll now hand over to Assistant Commissioner Scott Whyte.
Thanks. The New South Wales Police Force continues its operation in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic. A specific focus of our operation is compliance. Compliance for individuals and compliance for businesses. People need to understand that if they act outside the public health order or outside a public health direction, that the New South Wales Police will intervene and correct that behaviour. In the first instance, individuals can be fined $1,000, which will escalate to being arrested and possibly jailed. Businesses will be fined $5,000 and it will escalate to closure. This is a very serious situation and people need to act responsibly. We've seen evidence in the last 24 hours of people acting irresponsibly, and those persons will be subject to fines and other police action. A 22-year-old woman with no fixed place of abode was arrested and has been bail refused in relation to a continual breach of a COVID direction from the Victorian border. There was 2 instances of private residences where more than the 20 people were there, and those people will be subject to legal process. There was also an organised event that took place in a national park where a DJ was present and a significant number of people. All of those people are receiving infringements in relation to their behaviour. Thank you.
How many people were in that national park party, and what national park was it?
It was in the Thredbo area and up to 100 people.
And that'll be 100 fines of $1,000?
Every single person that's been identified will be fined. Obviously in the operational circumstances people seem to leave before we get a lot of their details, but there was a significant number detained and they'll be receiving process.
Will they all get tested and isolate?
That's a matter for health.
The other one, the first one I think you said, the person who refused, no place of abode. Where was that and what was the scenario there?
That was at Mount Druitt Railway Station. Police identified the person. They were aware that they were subject to a Victorian border crossing direction. The person was unable to comply and continued the offence, and subsequently she was placed under arrest.
So she was from Victoria?
No, she'd identified as a New South Wales returning resident.
And so she should have been in isolation and chose just to flout that?
Absolutely.
There was this, we mentioned before yesterday, you might have caught up with it, but police trying to do their job, doing an isolation check, and went to a house in Kiama, and it's been videoed. The police officer requested things, and they said that he was trespassing and demanded he leave their property, and they did not hand over their details. Firstly, it looked belligerent at first view. For a police officer, what do you think about that?
I think it's terrible, and we'll be taking the appropriate action in relation to that. But it is important to note that since this operation has commenced, we've done more than 20,000 compliance checks on individuals, and the vast majority of people are on the journey with us. They're compliant and they're assisting police. The same goes for the border. Most of the people that we're interacting with are more than happy to assist police and work with us to protect the community.
I might make a comment on that. It's important to note that with the 17,000 police that are out there at the moment as part of this operation, they're not there primarily to punish you, they're there to protect you. The implications of a further pandemic, like we've seen in Victoria, will have widespread ramifications in New South Wales. It's just not what we want. So people need to respect the New South Wales Police when they're doing their job. They are there to ensure that you're safe and you're healthy, and that your community and certainly the economy continues to evolve out of this pandemic. And they're not going to be alone. People need to realise that this is a joint operation. It's not just going to be the New South Wales Police that are providing infringements. They're going to be backed up by Fair Work. They're going to be backed up by Safe Work. They're going to be backed up by Fair Trading. They're going to be backed up by the Department of Health. Nearly all the resources available to the government, particularly when it comes to compliance, have been deployed as part of this operation. And we want to make sure people know that they have to treat every single one of them with respect, because as Assistant Commissioner Whyte has just said, if they don't, there'll be further ramifications because of their inability to work with us.